Okay, I'm going to introduce here Karen and Jeff. Karen has been here many times, sharing her voice with us. She was here last week with her trio, and she's a little worried about, do you guys really want me back here a second week? But this is very different from last week. We get to hear more of her voice, and of course, Jeff on the guitar. So Jeff has an interesting background. Jeff is a local guy. He's lived in the area since 1990 and lived between Kent County and Queen Anne's County. And he plays many instruments, supports a lot of local artists. And in the daytime, he works as a graphic designer at Lamont. And then it sounds like in the evening and the weekends, he does his fun stuff or his other fun stuff and plays music, supporting a lot of folks with many different instruments. One of the interesting things when I asked Jim when he started playing music, and he said, well, professionally about age 15, he said they had to sneak me in a few bars because I really wasn't supposed to be there. So he's been playing for a little while, maybe the 3 years, whatever it is. So give me a second here, too many papers. Okay, so we'll light the chalice.
I'm going to have you physically light it in a minute. Welcome. It's been good. Thank you for congregations that give ministers a vacation. It was lovely to be away, and it's good to be back. I'm going to read some chalice lighting words first, and then we'll do our shared words that we all know. But it seems important to acknowledge it is Easter, it is Passover. These words are about the holy days by Dilman Sorrells. For the holy days on which we recall the old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light this flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light this flame. For gathering today in this sacred space, we light this flame. We are together to remember the past, to plan for our future, and to be alive in the present. I invite everyone to share in saying our chalice lighting words. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within all creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be with us always. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts.
We're going to sing a hymn now, and it's going to be hymn number 61. It's the same one we sang last week, so we should be good at it. And Karen is going to lead us.
I think if we stay seated, is that working better for the people online? Yeah, stay seated for today. As Karen can lead us from the front standing would be great, Karen. We'd love that.
Lord, the earth awaits again. Hallelujah. From the winter's dawn and day. Hallelujah. Green and flowers spread. Hallelujah. To all the world, happy day. Once again the word comes true. Alleluia. All the earth shall be made new. Alleluia. Now the dark old days are o'er. Alleluia. Change then mourning into praise. Alleluia. And for dirges anthems raise. Alleluia. Our spirits soar and sing. Alleluia. How our hearts leap with the spring. Alleluia.
That's right.
So my opening words come from one of my favorite writers, Anne Lamott. She has a few things to say about spring. I'm going to try to pay attention to the spring this year. I'm going to look around at all the flowers and look up at the hectic trees. I'm going to close my eyes and listen. I'm going to notice the lights of the earth, the sun and the moon and the stars, the lights of our candles as we march, the lights with which spring teases us, the light that is already present. So given that, spring is here, spring is sprung, we got lots of flowers, good smells, lots of birds. So she has another little story about different times of the year. And this one is by her favorite pastor, Veronica, if any of you read Anne Lamott. Pastor Veronica told the story of a sparrow lying in the street with its legs straight up in the air, straining. A warhorse walks up to it and says, "What on earth are you doing?" The sparrow replies, "I heard the sky is falling and I want to help." The warhorse sneers, "Do you really think you're going to hold back the sky with those little scrawny legs?" The sparrow says, "One does what one can." So Reverend Sue's going to do some talks about that in her sermon, but right now she wants to lead us in a little meditation.
Unitarian Universalists at Easter look at the broad story. It's a story that does start in sadness. It starts in struggle and offers us resurrection as a way that we can look anew. It's interesting to hear the words that Catherine used today. I know what's in my sermon. I know what's in this meditation, and yet I found myself driving today on the last leg of my drive from Easton past Centerville, and my brain was churning with little things about each of my two congregations, nothing bad, but what was at the board meeting and there, and I realized I was missing the beauty of all that was around me as I churned. I think as we think through these words, I offer words today from Kathleen Rowlands about images of Easter. I want to think about both the struggle and what resurrection means as we look at these symbols around us. Her words are called "Easter is Breaking." Somewhere across the world, Easter is breaking. Not the Easter we may think of, but a much quieter, less dramatic Easter. Somewhere around the world, perhaps not this day, but sometime soon, a couple rise from their beds, shaking sleep from their eyes, and find their children awake and preparing for morning prayers. There has been no gunfire, no drug wars, no yelling or shouting or screaming, only the quiet of the night and the peace of silence around them. And somewhere in the world, Perhaps not this morning, but soon, very soon, a soldier is packing his duffel bag, has emptied out all his bullets, changing into civilian clothes and coming home, for peace has been established and there is no need for his presence. And somewhere in the world, Easter dawn breaks over the earth, not only on this day, but every day. And the familiar pulse in our veins throbs peace, peace, peace. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, may our hopes and dreams as we look around to the symbols of Easter and Passover, may they give us the courage to hope for peace, to imagine love prevailing, to imagine our community thriving in our families, in our hearts. Many meanings we take from Easter. Let's take a moment of reflection. Let's imagine what can be. Let's have that courage to imagine. We'll now build our community further as we share our personal joys and concerns. Catherine will lead us.
So I will light the candle, but you're welcome to come up and speak here into the microphone. I'd like to start by lighting a candle for the COVID victims and their families. Even though we're masking and not masking, there are still illnesses going around in our families and our friends, still impacting us. So we want to keep our concern about that. The second group that I want to express concern is about the victims in Ukraine and what's happening over there, and that may peace be on the horizon. And the last group to recognize is the people of the congregation and their friends who are suffering from illnesses and surgeries and loneliness. We think about all of you. Anyone like to come up?
I just wanted to celebrate that today is Jim's birthday. And so I wanted to share that as we celebrate this good person in our lives.
So my joy this morning is that sometime around 7:30 this morning, after 48 days sitting in the Chesapeake Bay, the evergreen, ever forward or never forward, as the pundits claimed, was removed. Nothing appeared to have leaked, and it is gone. I don't know what we'll all do at sunset in Rock Hall when we have nothing to look at across and talk about. But it's, you know, it's wonderful that it was removed without any damage to the environment.
Taking all the sand out with my fingers. I have a joy. Hopefully most of you know about the Kent Cultural Alliance building that's being restored downtown across from the post office. They're doing a lot of work on the inside now, and most of the windows have been replaced, which is not my joy. I wish the originals had stayed. But if you look up high, you can see there are a lot of old windows that have little bitty panes of glass. They're quite decorative. And they have agreed to let me and my company restore those windows back to their original beauty. So we're really proud to have the opportunity to do that. And we'll be filming the whole process and having John talk about the windows and a little history about the building. So we're really happy to do that.
In 3 days, it will have been a year since my granddaughter died from an overdose of drugs, and my son is having a really hard time. So I wish we could all keep him in our thoughts and prayers.
For those joys and concerns shared and those held in our hearts, let's observe a moment of silence. Blessed be.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Doo-doo, 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 many dangers, toils and snares I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace shall lead me home. Doo-doo, 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 when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, with no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. To-do, 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 to-do,
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both. So as the earth dependably does, we have this beauty of spring all around us. We've got these pink trees and the white blossoms and that green, you know, when you can just tell they're just about to pop, that green of those trees. We've even had those warm afternoons that tease us. This is what spring in the mid-Atlantic looks like. There are signs of renewal and hope in the nature, and there are also the stories of renewal and hope in the traditions of Easter and Passover. It's all around us. I think the question we've got for today is, what will we feel? What will we see and hear in the stories and the experiences this year? We are not naive, innocent souls who trust that all will be well when our recent experiences have us harboring doubts. These new buds, they take on a varying meaning each year when we take it and put it through our personal and shared experience. We ask hard questions of renewal and hope for good reasons. Our faith, our Unitarian Universalist faith, calls us to take in all of what is around us, the beauty, the challenges, the possibility, and to find both a personal and a shared path in the next step. So each year, each Easter, we connect with our world in a fresh way. And I looked back over the last 2 Easters. In 2020, we were just 4 years into the pandemic. And I read the Bible passage from John, the Gospel of John, and we've got Mary coming to the tomb in the morning. And I shared, our practical side knows that we are not going to be in this moment, that pandemic moment of shock and confusion forever. We know this too will pass. And yet, like that morning at the tomb with her spices in hand, there is no clear path forward in a story that keeps shifting. We were in shock 2 years ago. I shared of that darkness. I shared our absolute amazement that there had been 26,000 deaths in the United States. That number seemed overwhelming to us. Last Easter, we were a year in, and I talked about our time of continued adjustments. This is what I shared. Our time in this in-between zone will not be indefinite. My friends, we are called to use this adjustment time wisely, thoughtfully, lovingly. We are called to use the time courageously and together imagine what could be and what should be. That was last year. There were 550,000 deaths, COVID deaths in the United States. Vaccines were offering us some hope. Surely the path would clear. We could consider some hope maybe, but we were still adjusting. Our services, these 2 services were completely virtual. Nobody had been in the sanctuary for a long time. And I know by then I hadn't been in a restaurant for a year. But things would clear soon, wouldn't they? And then Delta and Omicron entered our vocabulary. We bounced from in-person to virtual services and back. We now report 983,000 deaths in the United States. We have a war in the Ukraine. We have a polarized country. So we have all this hard news in many directions. But we also have to remember the good news around us. To see the joy in the day-to-day life in our families and community, kids growing up and gathering and graduations a little more normal. Music, concert, warm days, and people working hard, moving toward peace, moving toward different policies. So we come to this Easter changed. Can we look this year at spring and renewal and hope and feel some sense of hope? Are we brave enough to actually celebrate? Are we ready? What does it mean to be ready for something? In the Easter story, we hear of the disciples of Jesus. These disciples were those they had followed. They were sort of a motley crew from what I can tell. They had been following Jesus for months to a few years by the time Easter was coming around. Some had been singled out. They had been pointed and said, you've got some healing powers. You keep everybody organized. But this growing cohort, disciples, think about what it means to be a disciple. Mostly they were learning disciples at this point. Jesus was giving them their directions. They were implementing emerging plans, and I'm guessing Jesus was figuring it out as he went as well. They were learning about the values that he was teaching within the thread of Judaism that he was understanding at the time. But their lives changed. This group of disciples, we don't know if they were staying in one house or group of houses, but there had been a crucifixion on Friday. Their leader was dead. Could they be flexible and resilient enough to move forward in some coordinated way? Were they ready? Easter morning, that stone rolled away, Jesus' body is missing, and the angels telling Mary Magdalene not to worry? Are you kidding? Mary was seeing Jesus in the garden. That was the resurrected Jesus. And she comes back to the house. She's telling these disciples, I'll say the guys stayed back. She's out there, whole separate sermon. But they heard her news, by most accounts, with skepticism. Jesus had told them he would rise, and yet they didn't see it as likely. They were tired followers. They were in shock. They were sad. They were distraught. They were likely questioning the reality. Were these really divinely inspired truths? Were they for real from God? Was Jesus that unique? There were plenty of other leaders they could follow. The other thing I'm imagining, in addition to them feeling sad and questioning the reality, is I can imagine they were rehashing the week. This week had gone badly. From entering Jerusalem on a donkey, palms spread out in welcome, to Jesus's arrest and trial and death. How had that happened? They were the disciples. Had they done everything they could have done to help? In addition to all this, I'm thinking these disciples are worrying about their own safety, where the authority is going to come for them as well. Were the disciples ready to move forward? What I do know is somehow something happened, and roughly 2 billion people, either this morning or a couple weeks either side of today, are celebrating something close to what we're talking about today. I don't know if they were ready, but something happened. As we think about these disciples, I want you to think even more about who they were. They were not some big coordinated group. They were mostly in their 20s and 30s. They had stood as witnesses to learn, and they were learning about the value of caring for all. They were learning about the problems of inequity. Some of the different stories, if you get into who these disciples were, you can find stories about, in theory, there were sort of 12, but we're pretty sure there were more than 12 disciples. And then you've got spouses, extended families. You can imagine a few in-laws weighing in with some opinions as to how all this can go. Andrew was one of the disciples. They describe him as the chief administrator. He was the dean, sort of. He was stable and decisive. We had Simon Peter. He was a bit more erratic, but he was the impulsive optimist. You can picture all these personalities coming together. Some of them were parents. Some of these young disciples already had their own families. Some were single, some were married. Some had extended families needing care. We tell these stories because these were real people. Like us, they had to figure out, are we ready? You can see the group dynamic a bit. You can imagine there were some who say, we need to act now, we need to do this, and some more methodically saying, but we're not ready, we need to plan a little bit. And you need both kinds in different scenarios. What does it mean to be ready for a challenge? When are we ready to take advantage of an opportunity? Because maybe being ready is not just about being prepared and being safe and being protected. Maybe being ready is, are we open enough? Are we open to change? Maybe being ready is just that place where we are stepping forward, not knowing the messiness, knowing we don't know the answers, but we're ready because we're inspired. I recently watched a relatively new documentary about the life and the works of Jane Goodall. I think a lot of folks know of Jane Goodall, the wildlife biologist, and she spent decades observing chimps and chimpanzees in Tanzania. She looked at these chimpanzees, she just studied for ages and how they used tools, how they played, their language, and she found that chimpanzees were very similar to humans. It was fascinating work. The documentary is called The Hope, and it emphasizes this moment in Jane Goodall's life. She had been doing this field work she absolutely loved for 25 years. And she was at a conference in 1986 to share all this information that she knew about animals and how anthropology and all these pieces work together. And she started realizing she knew way more than she thought she did. But what she knew about wasn't just about the animals. And she had this moment of clarity. She said, we are all part of the natural world, and we are destroying the natural world. That moment, she was in her early 50s, everything shifted. Everything she knew about chimps and their struggles was now going to be used in a different way. She says it's not what she wanted to do, but at that moment, she shifted from studier and observer to activist. She was a disciple with a message. Was she ready? She said she guessed she'd have to be. She moved from the forest to the lab, and she spoke before huge audiences. She spoke in centers of power, and she worked with children. She worked with children and found out different programs. That one of them is called Roots and Shoots, which is 50 different countries now. It went on. In that pivotal moment, not ready in the sense of every little detail figured out, but a new sense of clarity. One thing is amazing, she partnered with people that everybody else said didn't make sense to partner with. She partnered with Conoco Oil because they were willing to fund a way to make a sanctuary to keep the chimps safer. She kept discerning. She was unflappable in her mission. She said, you need to talk to people you don't agree with. Don't argue. You need to reach the heart. She travels about 300 days a year. She's now 88, and she's joyful in her work. She's a calm, steady presence. If we just keep defining readiness as feeling prepared and safe and making sure we've packed our bags and we have the exact right list of our glasses and our medications and our keys and our windbreakers, our water bottle, our hat, our sunscreens, we're really ordered, we're ready in that way, but are we paying attention to the opportunities around us? Is readiness more about being ready for the next adventure or the new learning? Is readiness about being ready to roll with what comes, often sometimes hard things, from weather to pandemics? Maybe our story today, this third Easter during COVID, is something like, we're as ready as we're ever going to be. Are we ready to risk hope? Jane Goodall said she'd rather be in a lab, but she had to make a difference. Where are we called to be disciples in the world? To show by our example whether we want to model kindness, care for our families. Do we have that courage to move forward in a new way, not having all the little details figured out? That shaky Easter morning, or so the story goes, the disciples started finding collective strength. One interesting reading is don't read the Bible linearly. Don't picture it as a history where this happened and this happened and this happened. It's a layered story going back and forth. Lots of lessons we learn. How long did it take them to pull together? Was it the same group? Where did Paul come in? Are you a fluid group? Can you work together? Jesus had pulled together and gathered the group, each with different skills and talents that were needed, and it wasn't a perfect group, but it was a group that in time trusted in the power of love that they sensed together, something beyond what they could grasp alone. One of the journals I was looking at, it's a journal called Joyality, and they wrote in June of 2020, perhaps being ready and feeling ready are not the same. I wonder if the seed feels ready when it sends up its first leaf. From everything I know about plants and the enormous risk they take in sprouting, I doubt it. It's a leap of faith toward life, toward growth, toward potential. Maybe we sometimes mix up being ready with thinking we're going to succeed. Maybe there's a lesson for us in this Easter. So when we see the buds and the new growth, when we hear the familiar stories, when we think about resurrection and possibility, the liberation of Passover, maybe we can see our world anew. When we hear the hymn that Karen sang so beautifully, or led us in singing, "Lo, the earth awakes again," are we ready to trust hope? Are we ready to say we're no longer thinking about it, we're no longer in shock, but we're ready to take a leap together, sort of like the disciples must have been doing that first Easter morning? Happy Easter, happy spring, and I look forward to hearing stories of what we're ready for next. Our closing hymn today offers us the same possibilities. It's right next to the other one. It is number 62. And we are grateful for Karen leading us in this hymn.
When the daffodils arise in the Easter holiday, and the spring starts to fly, that they are free and clear. When the pussy willows bloom in the spring holiday, let the heart find loving room, spread their welcome far and near. When the sweet rain showers come in the greening of the year, birds will sing and bees will hum. Hallelujah, thine is he.
I think we'll just do our closing words today, and then we're going to follow it with Go Lift It Up. Karen may not know that one, but we all know that. It is in, for those that don't know it, it is 1057 in your teal hymnal. And Catherine, after I offer the closing words, maybe you can extinguish the chalice. And after Go Lift It Up, we will have our postlude after that. For all who celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, may this day be another affirmation of divine love and promise. For all who see the eternal story of new spring and life beginning anew, May you breathe deeply of a season of promise and hope. For all who are experiencing despair or hopelessness this Easter, may you find darkness or depression a doorway to light and warmth that offers you freedom. For all of us, together we can do what no one isolated person can do. Rolling the heavy stone aside reminds us that we are far more powerful than we could ever be on our own. Our offering of strong hands to help, our prayers made real. Let us begin again, renewed by love. Chimpanzees, tools. We extinguish this flame, but not the warmth of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Nancy, you want to start us? Have our postlude.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies crying. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Thank you, everyone who made today's service possible. The music was just, I think, what we needed. We are ready. We are ready. And we're done.